Welcome back to the deep dive. We've got a really dense collection of source material in front of us today, and it places us squarely in one of the most intriguing and I think dangerous periods of Federation history. We're talking mid-2350s.
And we're going internal. This isn't about an external threat, not the Klingons or the Romulans. This is a deep dive into the very fabric of institutional betrayal.
Right.
It's a story where a decorated Starfleet officer, a hero, suddenly finds himself being hunted by his own security forces. The timeline here is just so critical, 2355 to 2357. That short, really volatile window between the Enterprise B and the launch of the Enterprise D.
And the scenario just kicks off with this massive, high-contrast hook. You have Kyle Riker, a brilliant strategist, running for his life through the back alleys of San Francisco.
In civilian clothes, completely put off.
And at the exact same time, completely unaware of this crisis, his son, Will Riker, is a promising cadet right there at the Academy, struggling with his own set of academic and ethical challenges.
So our mission today is to really pull apart this tangled knot. It's a personal crisis, but it's also a political one. We need to extract the raw insights here about how these deep-seated conspiracies actually operate.
The price of survival really is.
Exactly. And I think most importantly, how this complicated generational legacy, what the source calls the Riker way, how that impacts destiny, and how it steers both father and son toward these incredibly dangerous confrontations.
We have a lot of ground to cover. I think we need to slow this down a bit to really absorb the sheer complexity of the betrayal. So let's unpack this dense material, starting with a chilling opening move against Kyle Riker.
The conspiracy announces itself in June of 2355, and it does so with just shocking precision. Kyle Riker is targeted the moment he gets back to his San Francisco apartment.
And the attacker isn't, some shadowy assassin in all black.
No, not at all. It's a uniformed Starfleet yeoman second class, a man named William Hall.
And what's so disturbing about this, it isn't just the phaser fire. It's the chilling lack of agency in the attacker.
Yeah.
The material really spends time describing Hall's expression as blank-faced.
Yes. Consumed only with the immediate process. Like his mind wasn't even there. He was just executing a program. He fires a Type 2 phaser, which is standard issue, but it's powerful enough to blow a hole right in the wall next to Kyle's head.
That detail is so crucial. It immediately tells you that the people behind this are not relying on some disgruntled employee.
Yeah.
They're using controlled assets, maybe conditioned, maybe even brainwashed.
Right. And when Kyle manages to disarm him, the yeoman just stands there, blank, devoid of emotion. Like a machine that's just failed its primary function. It's the first real proof that the enemy is internal and sophisticated enough to manipulate Starfleet personnel at, the lowest levels.
But the situation escalates instantly. This isn't just one rogue asset. After he survives that attack, Kyle is rushed to the infirmary at Starfleet Command, the one place on Earth he should feel safest.
And while he's there trying to process what just happened, the conspirators double down. And it's terrifying.
They execute what the source calls the transporter bomb.
While Kyle is just a few blocks away, someone, using Starfleet transporter tech and protocols, beams a high-yield explosive directly into his apartment, utterly destroys the entire structure.
Okay, hold on. That raises a huge question about access, right? To materialize a bomb directly into a residential building, you'd have to bypass security, proximity sensors, local transporter logs.
You'd need high-level engineering clearance.
Or even Admiralty-level override codes. This wasn't some rogue officer with a grudge. This is a well-resourced cell operating with near-total impunity.
Precisely. And that technological access is the key reason Kyle loses all faith in the institution itself. He realizes Starfleet's own resources are being weaponized against him.
So he's in the infirmary, trying to process this trauma, and the conspiracy moves to phase 2, the false charges.
And Starfleet's complicity in it. While he's speaking with Lieutenant Ben Sisko, who, as an aside, was himself pretty distracted, his son Jake had just been born.
Right, I remember that detail.
Security officers arrive with an anonymous warrant, and this warrant bypasses the entire normal chain of command. It goes straight to the Admiralty. It names Admiral Paris and Vice Admiral Bonner.
And they want Kyle in custody, immediately, under the guise of providing medical facilities in the brig.
Kyle's a smart man. He connects the dots instantly. 1, he survives 2 attempts on his life involving Starfleet assets. 2, they're now arresting him based on anonymous charges, no due process. 3, they want him locked away in the brig, out of sight.
He knew that surrendering would be suicide. The source notes his stark calculation. He believed, quote, Killing me is the likeliest outcome.
The irony is just. It's palpable. A decorated officer feeling completely unsafe inside Starfleet headquarters, the supposed bastion of peace and justice in the Federation.
So he needs to escape. And he needs to do it fast. Sisko's distraction about Jake's birth gives him that momentary lapse in surveillance he needs.
And his escape strategy is just pure Riker. It's strategic, it's technological, it's brilliant. Instead of just turning off his PAD, which would be too obvious.
Too easy to triangulate.
Exactly. He finds an alley and he rapidly reprograms it. He creates a digital smokescreen.
He basically weaponizes the PAD's own GPS signal.
He does. He instructs it to send out confusing, totally random location data to the orbiting satellites. And the results were intentionally confounding. The signals placed him on Venus
In Taipei.
and on Taurus II, all at the same time. He wasn't just off the grid, he was everywhere and nowhere.
For an organization that's used to absolute digital control, that level of data corruption would make him effectively untraceable.
It bought him time, the most precious commodity he would have. Time to run, yes, but also time to solve the one mystery he knew held the key to his survival.
Which takes us back 2 years.
Exactly. Kyle knows the charges are linked to his professional history, not something he just did. So he focuses his investigation on the Tholian attack on Starbase 311. He was stationed there. He was the only survivor.
And this is where we first see that Riker way survival mechanism kick in. He'd been trying so hard to compartmentalize that trauma, just lock it away so he could function.
But now those very memories are his only lifeline. He forces himself to remember the scale of the attack, a coordinated assault by 6 Tholian ships. It was designed for annihilation.
And crucially, he remembers the Tholians used their signature energy web, but it wasn't the standard web Starfleet was used to. The source describes it as an updated version.
Yes, one that was specifically designed to disrupt the Starbase's its entire electronic nervous system.
Let's get into that disruption because it explains why the casualties were so high. This web didn't just take down the shields.
No, it targeted everything. Communications, weapon systems, auxiliary power. It even generated these intense, localized gravimetric distortions. It was slamming people against bulkheads, causing massive structural failure.
It prevented any kind of coordinated defense or evacuation.
Starbase 311 was basically rendered a defenseless, shaking metal coffin in a matter of minutes.
So as Kyle re-examines this, he starts to remember things about the station before the attack.
He remembers that small group of highly secretive scientists. Specifically, he names Rune, Heidel, and a few others. Their work was ultra-classified, conducted behind multiple layers of security protocols.
But there was a persistent rumor that they were engaged in illegal genetic engineering, which is, one of the most severe infractions against Federation law.
And the memory of this forbidden research now connects to the conspiracy. Because if you're looking for a motive big enough for this kind of cover-up, protecting illegal research, that's a pretty strong contender.
He then remembers that the work was so egregious that a half-Aurelian physicist, a man named Simon Ursistel, actually reported his suspicions to the proper authorities.
A man whose ethical backbone was clearly stronger than his fear.
And that report provides the timeline for the conspiracy. Ursistel's report led to a Federation hearing being scheduled. An investigative team was dispatched aboard the heavy cruiser USS Berlin.
And here is the nugget of insight that Kyle now focuses on. The Tholian attack happened the day after the investigative team on the Berlin arrived at Starbase 311.
His initial reaction, the conventional military one, was that the presence of a Starfleet cruiser provoked the Tholians.
A reasonable assumption at the time.
But now, running for his life, he starts to question that. He starts to fear that the secret scientists, Rune, Heidel, their whole group, were facing exposure, and that they may have actually manufactured the attack.
I mean, think about the depth of that treason. If they manufactured it, they needed a way to call the Tholians in while ensuring their own survival, or at least the destruction of the evidence.
But the scientists died in the massacre, which complicates the theory.
It does, unless their deaths were an unintended consequence, or perhaps they were eliminated by the conspirators after the fact to ensure their silence. Kyle couldn't shake the fear that the Starbase 311 attack wasn't a Tholian assault at all, but a deliberate act of mass murder orchestrated from within Starfleet to eliminate witnesses and evidence.
This realization that the enemy isn't just a few rogue officers, but the very corruption of Starfleet's highest ideals, that's what drives him off-world entirely.
He needs a place where Starfleet's reach and its technology simply can't find him.
Which leads him to Hazimot.
He seeks refuge on Hazimot, a planet in the Sire Nation, and he chose it specifically because it was non-Federation, politically volatile, and well, complex. It offered absolute anonymity.
The society on Hazimot is described as a brutal plutocracy. We should probably spend a moment on this structure, because it's critical to the environment Kyle finds himself in.
It is. The society is ruled by a council of 7 members who represent only the wealthiest minority.
The source material compares it to the Gilded Age of the late 19th century United States.
Which means you have this massive, visible gap between an extraordinarily wealthy elite and an impoverished majority. The ruling council's main function was to raise money through taxes and fees.
Which were then channeled into, and I'm quoting here, lucrative, meaningless government contracts that only served to enrich the council members and their allies.
It was a closed loop of self-dealing, and it was fueling this widespread, totally justifiable discontent among the people.
And that chaos, ironically, provides the perfect cover for Kyle. He adopts an alias, Joe Brady, and he takes menial labor jobs paid daily in cash. He operates completely outside of any formal system.
Starfleet's tracking systems rely on financial and logistical footprints. Kyle Riker just evaporated from those systems.
His living situation reflects this need for anonymity, too. He settles in a squatter's hovel in a district they call the End.
An area defined by a total lack of privacy, people are living right on top of one another. But paradoxically, that offers a kind of freedom. As the source says, no one asked difficult questions there. Everyone was hiding from something.
But Kyle Riker, the man defined by duty and strategy, he finds he can't just be a bystander. He's running from Starfleet corruption, but he finds himself immersed in this local, undeniable civilian corruption.
He becomes embedded with a local revolutionary cadre. The leader was a human woman named Michelle, and there were others like Rug, Cetra, Jackdaw. They weren't extremists, they were revolutionaries who understood that the people needed a visible symbol of opposition.
And their strategy was fascinating. It was nonviolent. It was all about public relations. The target was a high-profile parade celebrating the induction of a counselor's son, Maharos Ka Ennis.
Right. The council was using these superficial displays of power to project stability. The revolution aimed to shatter that illusion.
The plan was basically brilliant street theater. No explosives, no phasers.
They planned to stretch thin, nearly invisible wires at key points along the parade route. The goal was simply to trip the soldiers and politicians, make them look foolish. The embarrassment, the image of their leaders fleeing at the first sign of disruption, they hoped that would spark a popular uprising.
But entrenched power rarely responds to embarrassment with surrender.
The plutocracy reacted with immediate, overwhelming, and totally disproportionate violence. Armored police vehicles rolled in. What was meant to be a comedy became a tragedy of mass arrests and bloodshed.
And this uprising failed, violently, and it led directly to the death of Michelle, the woman who had given Kyle a new sense of purpose.
This is the moment that forces Kyle to abandon his hard-won anonymity. Facing the imminent slaughter or arrest of his neighbors in the end, he makes this incredible, sacrificial decision.
He steps into the street, facing down a dozen armed rifles, and he announces himself over the police loudspeaker. Not as Joe Brady.
No. He says, "I'm Kyle Riker."
He gives up his fugitive status to save strangers. It's the ultimate proof that Michelle's influence had changed him. He was a fugitive Starfleet officer who had just revealed his identity to a hostile, non-Federation government.
He was instantly arrested, but he secured the safety of the neighborhood.
And it's Michelle's death, coupled with his arrest, that becomes the real catalyst for his return. She had convinced him that he couldn't find peace fighting other people's wars. He had to face his own injustice back on Earth.
He had to go back to Starfleet and neutralize his unseen enemy.
It's just jarring to realize that while the father is sacrificing his freedom, fighting plutocrats and uncovering this grand treason, his son, Will Riker, is facing a very different kind of Starfleet pressure.
The pressure to conform, to excel, and to survive within the system.
Let's turn to that. Let's look at Will Riker's time at the Academy.
Will Riker's Academy years are really the crucible where his defining character traits are forged, the ones that will save him later. We find him engaged in one of his final assignments, the Urban Survival Project in San Francisco.
And this project was a deliberate nod to Starfleet lore, wasn't it? Inspired by Captain Kirk's time travel mission to the 20th century.
It was. The goal was simple. Survive for a week incognito. No uniforms, no ID, just following a series of convoluted clues designed to test resourcefulness, stealth, and teamwork.
Will was part of Zeta Squadron, and the dynamic of this group is fascinating. It's a perfect microcosm of Starfleet's diversity, all of them thrust into these uncomfortable circumstances.
You had Will Riker, already establishing himself as the strategist. The sources note he devoured military history, Sun Tzu, Clausewitz. His mind was already geared towards conflict resolution through deep historical precedent.
Then you had Felicia Mendoza, athletic and forthright,
Yeah.
described with a vaguely Latin American accent. She was sort of the group's pragmatic conscience.
And Estrus Orfil, a diminutive Zimonian female who was brilliant, intensely serious, and famously humorless. She insisted both her names be used at all times, a sign of her strict adherence to protocol.
Dennis Hames was the designated squadron leader, red-headed and carrying the stress of that leadership very heavily. But the most interesting one, and the biggest risk, was Boone, the lanky, laconic Corridanian.
Boone exhibited this unexpected and almost shocking truculence. He had a decidedly non-academy set of skills. While others were trying to use logic, Boone took the lead in the group's necessary descent into criminality.
Specifically breaking and entering to secure shelter.
And he did it efficiently, without a fuss, which suggests, terrifyingly, that he had done this many times back on Corridon.
The deployment itself was chaotic by design. It was meant to scatter them and force rapid self-reliance. Dennis, the leader, got beamed onto Alcatraz. Will found himself in Golden Gate Park.
But Boone got the worst of it. He was intentionally beamed into the sea near the city, forcing him to wade ashore. He was convinced it was because of his Corridanian background, which added the simmering resentment to the group dynamic.
Their clues led them to Nob Hill, then Twin Peaks. The test wasn't just about survival, it was about maintaining Starfleet discipline under pressure.
Which, unfortunately, culminated in spectacular chaos. While working a clue at a local seafood market, Zeta Squadron found themselves in a bizarre confrontation with Omega Squadron.
A full-scale fish fight.
A literal fish fight. The source emphasizes the absurdity of it. They were engaged in non-lethal combat, but the air was thick with the smell of the sea, and seafood parts were everywhere.
I just have to pause here. The juxtaposition of the high-minded ideals of Starfleet, which Kyle Riker is being hunted for defending, and the reality of its future officers throwing fish at each other is just, it's astounding.
It's a perfect example of the human element messing up the perfect machine. No matter how sophisticated the institution, the unpredictable human or Corridanian or Zimonian element will always complicate things.
And the consequences were immediate.
And severe. Even though Will Riker and another cadet, Paul Rice, were specifically noted as not participating in the fighting, the entire squadron was reprimanded by Superintendent Virak.
Virak, a Vulcan known for her detailed, almost eidetic memory of cadet records.
And she used this moment to establish her dominance. She showed Will she had read his entire file, even mentioning a seemingly insignificant incident from when Will was 11. The message was clear. Starfleet knows everything, and past failures will always be held against you.
The repercussions from that fish fight were swift, and they led directly to a defining moment in Will's career. He lost his prestigious summer posting to a project orbiting Saturn.
And this setback just fueled his frustration, his need to prove himself outside the conventional system.
Enter Paul Rice, the other cadet who avoided the fight. He challenges Will to an unauthorized shuttle race around Saturn's moon, Phoebe.
This wasn't just fun. This was classic Riker impulsivity, seeking a high-stakes, high-risk activity to reestablish his worth after being unjustly disciplined.
And the source notes that Paul was flying a shuttle that was already in for repairs. Just a clear indication of the recklessness here.
And, true to form, the race instantly turns into a high-stakes rescue mission. Paul crashes his already compromised shuttle into a localized ion storm near Phoebe's icy surface.
So Will Riker faces a choice. Follow protocol, wait for rescue, and watch his friend die, or immediately engage in a suicidal rescue attempt.
He chose the Riker way. He defied the shuttle computer, he defied implied orders, and he deliberately flew his shuttle into the ion storm, shields at full, relying entirely on his piloting skill.
But the ion storm presented a fatal barrier. The magnetic interference meant that as long as his shields were up to protect the ship, he couldn't get a transporter lock on Paul.
He had to trade his own survival for Paul's.
And this is the crucial moment. Will is forced to lower the shields just for a moment to get that transporter lock. As soon as they drop, the shuttle is pounded by the storm, entering a deadly, uncontrollable downward spiral.
He's fighting crippling G-forces and the raw power of the storm, but he manages to transport Paul, and then, somehow, by sheer force of will, he re-engages the shields and fights the ship back to stability.
They survived. But the Academy noticed. They faced Superintendent Virak again, and she did not mince words. She called their actions stupid and an affront to the laws of probability.
But it wasn't expulsion. Admiral Paris, the same Admiral Paris who will later play a critical role in Kyle's story, He intervened.
And Paris praised them, not for following the rules, but for their raw skill and survival instinct. He called it a unique combination of bravery and audacity, a Riker trait.
They were reprimanded, their grades were docked, but the core lesson was that survival sometimes requires you to break the rules.
It's so interesting how this incident validates the exact behavior pattern that led to Kyle's current situation. Duty, survival, results, all trumping regulations. But this pattern soon leads Will into a much trickier ethical conflict.
Yes, the Ion Storm rescue tested his bravery, but the breakdown of his friendship with Dennis Haynes, that tested his character and his priorities. Dennis, the former squadron leader, he was suffering from immense academic stress.
This wasn't just a missed assignment, he was facing a complete breakdown. The pressure was just overwhelming him, and he asked Will to cheat for him.
A request that strikes at the very core of Starfleet integrity and at Will's own professional future.
Will's refusal was immediate, though he did offer to help him study. The refusal caused an instant glacial break in their friendship. Dennis, seeing his future crumble, accused Will of betrayal, declared their friendship a lie, and just stormed out.
I have to push back on the interpretation a little, though. Was Will's refusal really about pure ethical integrity, or was it about that Riker tendency to compartmentalize and prioritize career success above deep personal connection?
That's the critical analysis we have to apply. He was unwilling to sacrifice his professional advancement, 4 years of work, for a friend who was failing.
It absolutely mirrors Kyle Riker's life. Kyle spent years compartmentalizing family, work, trauma, recovery. Will, faced with the choice between self-discipline, protecting his career, and empathy, risking it for a friend, he chose self-discipline. He chose the Riker way, success at the expense of connection.
And we know Felicia Mendoza was profoundly disappointed. She felt Will just let him walk out the door. She argued that Riker, the strategist, the leader, should have done more to prevent Dennis's spiral, even if he couldn't cheat for him.
But the failure with Dennis, however painful, it just reinforced Will's ultimate focus. He graduated, got assigned as a helm officer aboard the USS Pegasus. He reflected on his isolation friends, scattered, father a ghost, but he found this profound confidence in his ability to do his job. The personal cost was high, but the professional self-assurance was absolute. I can do the job.
And it's exactly this self-assured young officer aboard the Pegasus who was about to become an unwitting pawn in the very same conspiracy his father has been risking his life to uncover. The two narratives are about to converge.
And in a spectacular, violent fashion.
Let's get to that convergence. 2 years after he vanished, Kyle Riker returns to San Francisco. He's armed now, not just with knowledge, but with this renewed moral certainty from Michelle's sacrifice. He's there to face the music.
But the conspiracy is waiting for him. Kyle is almost immediately ambushed by an attacker in an ill-fitting blue suit with a vacant, glazed expression. And this is Carson Cook.
One of the most tragic details in the entire narrative.
Carson Cook was not some random thug. He was the Starfleet security officer who originally tried to serve the warrant on Kyle 2 years ago. Kyle realizes instantly that Cook is another programmed, mindless tool, a blank slate activated just to kill him.
Let's detail the tragedy of Cook's fate, because it defines the ruthlessness of the conspirators. 2 years earlier, after the first botched attempt on Kyle, a bizarre incident completely wiped Cook's memory. The records say his mind was wiped so clean, he couldn't remember how to pull on a pair of boots.
All known therapies failed. He was institutionalized, mindless.
The conspirators didn't need a live operative. They needed a programmed missile. They activated this blank slate, giving him one sole purpose: kill Kyle Riker. He was housed in a psychiatric facility, murdered an ensign to escape, put on the nearest civilian clothes, that ill-fitting blue suit, and went after his target.
But this time something changed. Starfleet security officers were nearby. They had finally been convinced that Kyle Riker was the target, not the criminal.
So when Cook targeted Kyle with a stolen phaser, the security team immediately opened fire, taking Cook down permanently, ending his tragic, manipulated existence.
And this bizarre, non-rational attack, a man whose mind was already gone, activated as a tool, that's what finally convinces Admiral Paris. The conspiracy is confirmed as undeniably real, internal, and willing to use the most despicable methods.
Kyle is immediately transported to Starfleet headquarters, brought into the Situation Room by Admiral Owen Paris, who realizes they've been chasing the victim all along. But the reunion is immediately thrown into crisis.
In the Situation Room, Kyle receives the most alarming news imaginable. His son, Ensign Will Riker, is aboard the USS Pegasus, a Starfleet vessel caught in a highly disputed border zone between the aggressive Omistolian and Ven fleets.
The Pegasus is effectively paralyzed. The Onistolians, led by a commander named Oxreg, they seize the opportunity. Oxreg proposes a deal to Captain Pressman, a deal that is morally abhorrent but strategically tempting.
They'll spare the Starfleet ship if Pressman agrees to use the Pegasus as bait, a human shield against the approaching Ven fleet.
Will Riker's life is now hanging in the balance, directly threatened by a Starfleet-endorsed plan of sacrifice. And Kyle is in the Situation Room with Admiral Paris and, critically, Vice Admiral Bonner, the very man Kyle suspects facilitated the original cover-up.
Kyle has to save his son, but he also needs absolute authority and trust, which means he has to neutralize Bonner.
This is the moment for Kyle Riker, the strategist, to make his move. He uses the threat to the Pegasus as leverage to force the truth about Starbase 311 into the open.
He links the present danger to the past trauma, demanding answers about Vice Admiral Bonner's direct order to suppress critical intelligence about the Tholian attack 2 years ago.
This is the climax of the mystery. Let's slow down and unpack the entire chain of treason that Kyle now lays out with deadly precision.
Okay, first, the motive. Kyle theorizes that Bonner wasn't just following Starfleet secrecy orders. He was acting on personal grief and misguided loyalty. He was trying to protect one of the scientists at 311, Heidel, who may have been a close friend.
And Heidel was a criminal involved in that illegal genetic engineering.
Second, the mechanism of the Starbase 311 attack. Kyle gets an ensign to confirm intercept communications. The Tholians attacked 311 because they believed, based on deliberately fabricated Starfleet intelligence, that the base was the staging point for a Federation incursion into their space.
So, connecting the dots. Heidel and his cohort, facing exposure by the investigative team on the USS Berlin, manufactured false intelligence and fed it to the Tholians.
Their goal was to trigger a preemptive strike that would destroy the Berlin, the investigative team, and all evidence of their illegal work.
And when Heidel died in the attack he instigated, Bonner, motivated by grief and a desire to protect his dead friend's reputation, used his position to arrange the cover-up and target Kyle, the lone survivor who could connect the Tholian attack to Heidel's treason.
It confirms the entire conspiracy. The transporter bomb, the blank-faced yeoman, the manipulated Carson Cook was all driven by one vice admiral's profoundly misguided loyalty to a dead traitor. It wasn't institutional malice. It was corruption rooted in deeply personal, raw human emotion.
Kyle, seeing his son's life threatened and the traitor standing right next to him, knows he has no time for formal arrest protocols. He needs Bonner neutralized now.
Vice Admiral Bonner, cornered and exposed, he pulls a phaser on Kyle, his last resort. He snarls, "We'd like to see your precious strategy get you out of this."
And Kyle executes a final strategic ploy that isn't military, it's brutally physical.
He uses a quick left jab, followed by a vicious, calculated right punch to Bonner's chin. It knocks the Vice Admiral unconscious against the wall. He disarms him, hands the phaser to Admiral Paris, and secures the room,
forcing Paris's complete trust. There's no longer any doubt about Kyle's claims or his ability to act decisively.
With Bonner neutralized and the conspiracy exposed, Admiral Paris approves Kyle's desperate plan to save the Pegasus. Meanwhile, aboard the ship, Will Riker is demonstrating that potent Riker trait of duty over fear.
Captain Pressman's desperate plan requires a sacrifice, and Will volunteers for what he knows is a suicide mission.
He's prepared to stay behind and destroy the Pegasus if necessary to prevent the ship from falling into enemy hands. He is ready to die for the mission, demonstrating that Riker family tendency to put the duty of protecting Starfleet above their own lives.
Fortunately, due to Kyle's intervention and strategic maneuvering from the Situation Room, now free from Bonner's influence, the Pegasus escapes the conflict zone without that ultimate sacrifice.
Father and son both survive, narrowly escaping crises driven by deep institutional failure.
And with the danger past, Kyle Riker finally has the time to reflect on the immense personal cost of his lifelong focus on duty and survival. He starts tracing the pattern back through his family history, the root of what he now recognizes as the Riker way.
The source material cites his great-great-grandfather, Jamie Riker, who led his town through the devastation of World War III. Jamie was a monument to survival, a man who persevered against impossible odds.
The Riker line is one of Tastern's soldiers, defined by endurance, perseverance, and crucially emotional compartmentalization.
This compartmentalization, Kyle realizes, it was a survival tool in the 20th and 21st centuries. It enabled success during war and chaos, but in the 24th century, it's become a profound barrier.
The problem is that this Riker way, valuing duty and survival above all else, has led to profound, sustained loneliness. He acknowledges the mistakes he made with his late wife Annie, his relationship with Kate, his bond with Michelle on Hazimot, and most tragically, his lifelong distance from Will.
This is the most painful acknowledgement of his life. He sees that Will, who excelled professionally but failed ethically when he let Dennis Haynes walk out the door, is doomed to repeat this generational cycle of loneliness unless the pattern is broken. Will's survival instinct is strong, but his ability to connect is severely compromised.
But despite the trauma, the conspiracy, and the pain, they both survived. And Kyle finds a fragile sense of peace. He accepts his familial failure is real, but he recognizes the possibility of change.
The knowledge he's gained that the Riker way leads to success, but also isolation, allows him to step away from isolation itself.
His final thought, the ultimate takeaway from his journey, is profound. Alone now didn't have to mean alone forever. It's a message that this generational pattern of prioritizing professional duty and survival at the cost of personal connection, it can and it must be deliberately broken.
What stands out most starkly in this deep dive is the corrosive power of secrets driven by misplaced personal loyalty. The entire elaborate conspiracy. It was all rooted in two fundamental acts: the illegal genetic engineering at Starbase 311 and Vice Admiral Bonner's personal trauma and misguided revenge against Kyle.
Bonner's motto wasn't strategic Starfleet policy. It was emotional attachment and grief. By weaponizing his authority to protect a dead friend's criminal reputation, he threatened the very foundations of the institution he served. It just illustrates how often high-stakes corruption is driven by these small, deeply personal failures of judgment.
So when you, the learner, are analyzing complex systems or institutional failures, the critical lesson here is the contrast between the institutions and the individuals who operate within them. Starfleet, the institution, is capable of generating high ideals, represented by Admiral Paris's eventual trust in Kyle and the Academy's core purpose.
But the corruption stems entirely from powerful individuals. Bonner, the secretive scientists, the manipulation of low-level assets like Yeoman Hall and Carson Cook. We must always question the source and look for the hidden, often deeply emotional motivations behind surface-level actions, even in the most trusted organizations.
We also gain a critical insight into the power and the danger of a fixed identity, the Riker way. Both Kyle and Will Riker exhibit incredible resilience, strategic acumen, and professional focus. And this fixed identity ensures their success in high-risk environments, whether it's escaping a conspiracy or rescuing a shuttle in an ion storm.
But this hyper-focus on survival and compartmentalization exacts a severe toll. It leads to profound loneliness, failed relationships, and ethical short-sightedness, as Will showed when he prioritized his own career over saving his friend Dennis Haynes from academic disaster. It highlights how patterns of behavior, even those that lead to success, can impose severe limitations on personal happiness and connection. It's a self-limiting destiny.
Kyle Riker finally understood that loneliness was a choice rooted in a generational pattern. He recognized that emotional compartmentalization, while useful for survival during the darkness of a conspiracy, prevented him from truly living in the light. His realization that alone now didn't have to mean alone forever is a declaration of intent to break that cycle.
So, for you to consider, how does confronting a difficult, painful truth, like Kyle Riker's forced trauma or Will's cold ethical failure with Dennis, fundamentally shift your ability to connect with others and secure a better, less isolated future? What are the difficult, long-term lessons learned from prioritizing absolute duty and survival over immediate, messy human satisfaction? That is a legacy worth exploring long after this deep dive ends.